So, yeah, thanks to Georgia's runoff law, the 2022 elections aren't over yet. But can we talk about 2024? This time on Poll Hub, pollsters are already asking about 2024, and Donald Trump has already announced he's running. So, does he stand a chance? And what about a Biden-Trump rematch? We are taking a look. Then, new data about cigarette smoking is very encouraging. Young people are not picking up the habit as they have in the past. That doesn't mean they aren't smoking something. And Lee's fun fact sticks with that topic to head way back in time when it seems like almost everybody was smoking tobacco one way or another. We are back from our turkey sabbatical and the L-tryptophan is out of our systems. So I think we're ready to get to it. And hi, everybody. Post-Thanksgiving, welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvello.
I'm Lee Maringoff.
Lee, you've been wanting to talk about 2024 since, 2020, but now we actually can. We're mainly through the 2022 elections. And Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, has announced he's running. So we've already got one big candidate in the race. And there's pollsters, including, what is it, the Marist poll? The Marist poll, I've heard of them, that has done some polling on this. A couple of numbers.
Are you talking about that poll that nailed everything in the 2022 elections?
We did that in the last podcast, but we could do it every week if you'd like.
Somehow I think Lee is going to.
Yeah.
At least until the next election.
Right. Well, be careful about
when we have to earn our stripes again.
Yeah. So a couple numbers real quick. In our survey, which was released this month, just a couple weeks ago, 54% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents think that the GOP has a better chance of winning in 2024 if Donald Trump is not the nominee. And we asked that question back in October of 2021, and 35% at that time said the same. So there's been a big move among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents to say, hey, maybe not Trump as their nominee if they want to win the White House back. Then we asked the same question about Biden, and 54%, if that sounds familiar, it's the same number. 54% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents in this November poll said the Democrats have a better chance of winning if Biden is not the nominee. We asked that question back in October of 2021, and at that time, 44% thought that a different Democrat would be stronger. So that number has increased as well. The unsures have dropped largely. There's 20% were unsure in 2021, only 8% now. So the movement is away from unsure to, yeah, maybe not Biden. So what does this mean? And there's other numbers we may get to here, but what does this mean for 2024 and a Biden-Trump rematch?
Well, I would say if there is a rematch, one of those statistics is going to have to change because one of them will win. But, I think there's a lot at work here. And I think let's take former President Donald Trump first. He has not gotten out of the trouble zone. And in fact, November was probably one of his worst months. Many of his anointed Republican candidates who ended up in the general election were defeated. Herschel Walker, probably the last hope for him, and that may be a big lift. But there were a lot of primary candidates. The takeaway from the November elections was Donald Trump was probably more harm to the GOP than help in terms of, costing them seats. And then you look at the possible people who might run against him, challenge. And Florida Governor DeSantis, obviously did really, really well. I think former Vice President Pence is also looking to occupy that important evangelical path lane in the GOP side of things. And, he has a tough kind of, I like Trump, I don't like Trump kind of position there. And then the former President Trump also with the whole Mar-a-Lago thing, with the dinner at Thanksgiving with the Nazi sympathizer or however you want to call it, and then he's claiming he had no idea.
I think you can actually call Nick.
Call him a Nazi.
I think you can call him a Nazi. I think he's okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. We don't have to use any of the qualifiers, but Republicans who are tiring a little bit of Donald Trump are using kind of like any excuse right now, even that, which they didn't jump on him when he was, talking nicely about David Duke not too many years ago. But this seems to have, given them a little chance. Some Republicans are sort of indicating that this would not be the right way to go and that maybe his time is past. And as far as Democrats are concerned, Joe Biden is 80. And I think people are wondering about whether it's time to turn over the reins of the Democratic Party to a new generation, which is not all that different from what Republicans are probably thinking also. We have a lot of elderly wannabes, former presidents and current presidents. And I think people are sort of, looking to move on from that, particularly with a lot of young people certainly becoming more active in the political process and not enjoying that 50-year age gap between themselves and our nation's leaders. But so lots of stuff going on already for 2024, and certainly the jockeying for position is there. And Trump is in. Biden says he's likely to be in. He intends to be in, and yeah, there's lots of dissension for either of them.
Yeah, I just might add when we look at that 54% negative for both Trump and Biden. I mean that's a tough question, especially when approval ratings are underwater and the economy is not exactly going well. People think the country is moving in the wrong direction. It's really tough to say, do you, in essence, do you want to have this person as your nominee or someone else? Because the someone else is not defined in any way. It's left up to the person to think of, the possibility of someone else that might be running for president. The Quinnipiac poll also did some questions about Trump and his throwing his hat in the ring for president again. And I think one of the things that was really interesting there was they also we did not put toss-ups together for primaries or for the general election, but they did, and they asked Americans whether they would prefer Governor DeSantis over Trump, and 43% said yes to 29% for Trump for the GOP. But interestingly, Republicans divided 44 to 44. So that's going to be the first step to any of these contests going forward. And a lot of states don't include independents in their primaries. So if there's a crowded field as well on the Republican side, I think Trump still stands ready to get some footing.
But Barb, how much of this has to do with what you mentioned at the beginning there? I mean, how often in American history, when people are feeling down about the country or the situation as they are now, they always want somebody else. I mean, it's the easy out. I mean, I'm not
Absolutely.
trying to,
Yeah. I
to
mean,
harp on this, but the
yeah.
easy out is, yeah, somebody else.
Yeah, in fact, I don't remember which state it is, but they even have none of the above on the ballot. So sure,
I think
it's
is that
it's always
Nevada? I think it's
It's
Nevada.
Nevada. Yeah, it was Nevada. Yeah.
so it is really tough to run against the imaginary. So I think there's a lot more here. I mean, I would qualify this on the Biden side, that there's probably a lot more negative there. Democrats tend to be younger. I think there is a sense among Americans, as we've polled, that there actually should be an age limit for running for president. And so when we look at the Q poll, and whether Democrats want Biden to run, it is a majority, but it's a slim one, 51%. So I think he has a little bit of a more difficult road ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I had just two qualifiers on the question of this 54% not wanting uh, to run. I mean, the question
Biden or
actually,
Trump?
who has a better chance of winning? And I think what that addresses, I think, is kind of the reputation for these guys are not as strong as they, were. And I think when it comes to Donald Trump, I mean, this has been something that everybody's been watching about him since he came on the scene and, had a ceiling supposedly above him among Republicans, which obviously evaporated or disappeared. But one of the things I think that's interesting in the NBC News poll in early November is that an increasing number of Republicans and independent leaning Republicans think that they're more supportive of the Republican Party than of Donald Trump, and it's a 2-to-1 number. So what suggests to me is, some of the lusters off of former President Trump. Joe Biden has not really had that kind of massive following that Trump has had, but I think that it's fair to say that if you're looking to see if there's a little crack in Trump's support within his party, within his base, then all these numbers sort of indicate, yeah, there's some of that. And there may be a Make America Great Again sentiment, but he doesn't necessarily be the carrier of that again. It could be DeSantis, it could be Pence, could be one of a large number of others.
But Lee, yeah, before we move on, I think that's actually a really interesting point. Really quickly, because we do have to move on, but I want to hear this from you. If the Republicans, if it looks like they're going to nominate somebody other than Trump, does that make it more likely Democrats are going to actually look for somebody beyond Biden? Because I don't think it's going to happen if that they're going to look for somebody to replace the sitting president.
Yeah, no. That's hard. I mean, I think they're in a very awkward situation either way with that, because Biden as president sort of gets to call his own shots. And if he wants to run, it's going to be really hard to dislodge him. So in a sense, he has to be convinced not to in that case. I think if Donald Trump is the nominee, or looks like he's going to be the nominee, I think he's more likely that Joe Biden says we're going to go toe to toe one more time. But, this is something we'll talk about. I can't believe we're already into 2024, but they are. So we should be too.
Well, I'd like to switch gears. There's a new research from Gallup which shows that young Americans have given up cigarettes faster than any other group over the last 20 years. They've gone from the group most likely to smoke to second least likely. And this has been over the last couple of decades, since 2001. But they're still the group that's most likely to be smoking. So they're still kind
What
of
does that mean?
participating in the
What does
same
that mean, Barb?
activity.
Yeah.
You tell me, Jay, what exactly does that mean?
Well, one of them is the most likely group to use e-cigarettes, but the real big number is the number of young people smoking marijuana. And remember that marijuana is legal in a lot of states, and a lot of people eat it. Edibles is actually a huge way to consume marijuana, but people smoking marijuana, young people, the percentage has jumped about 50% since 2013. So they're giving up one thing, but they're taking up another, it looks like.
And I spent the 60s in the library, so I don't even know what
I
you
knew-
guys are talking about.
I knew that was coming. We're talking
Well,
about
actually,
cigarettes
actually,
here,
you
Lee.
you
We're not
were a
talking-
smoker.
I
Lee.
was a cigarette smoker for about 6 years, mostly through college, and a friend of mine sort of said, "You're no longer going to smoke," and it was a long weekend, but did break me of it, and so that was a real plus. In retrospect, but yeah, and you don't see people smoke. When you see someone smoking now a cigarette, it's really kind of like an eye opener. It's like, wow, there's a cigarette. You just don't see it. What I thought was interesting also, though, in these numbers, and like we put a political spin on everything, but they looked about different states around the country in smoking, and 14 of the top 15 states where cigarette smoking is still popular, those are red states, and 13 of the 15 lowest consumption states were blue states. So is actually a pretty strong relationship between political.
Although that's educational attainment, because if you go back to the Gallup, those numbers are from Nice RX, from some numbers they put together from 2021. But if you go back to those Gallup numbers, educational attainment is actually very strongly correlated with smoking rates. And the lower educational attainment, the higher the smoking rates, the lower educational attainment, there's also correlated with red versus blue states. So
Yeah, let me just also just go through a couple of these numbers. So we're looking at from 2001 to 2003, an average of 35% of U.S. adults between the ages of 18 and 29 said that they smoked cigarettes. That's compared with 12% in the latest estimate. So I mean, we're seeing quite a significant decline among young adults, and more than double that of any other age group over this particular time. Now, certainly the increase has been in the use of e-cigarettes, and vaping is certainly much more common among these age groups. But even among older Americans, smoking has really significantly declined. One of the things too, Lee, you do mention that you make everything political, and you mentioned that it is the red states. Well, when we're actually doing our polling, we have looked at a couple of questions to see whether they can correlate with how people vote. And one of them is smoking, and whether people do continue to smoke. And we do find that there is a relationship, as although there may be a lot of, as we say in the research biz, intervening variables, but Republicans are much more likely to smoke, as are people who support Donald Trump.
that's interesting. But when you say intervening variables, that kind of gets back to the educational attainment and a bunch of other, it's multi-factor.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and it's where they live. We've talked about geography a lot too. Rural
Right.
voters are more likely to be smokers than urban voters. So when I say intervening variables, there's a lot of lifestyle and also demographic and other factors that go into whether people light up.
I think it's funny. It's not funny. I think it's interesting that the cigarettes, the movement. There's the big tobacco settlements and all of that. The big kind of public fights over tobacco have largely disappeared. There was getting smoking out of bars in New York. Remember, in restaurants, that was a huge thing, and it's kind of disappeared. And the last line of that is to ban menthol cigarettes, and that's something
Mm.
that is happening, or that's kind of the cause that's being born. And yet, on the other side, because we started this talking about how young people are smoking fewer cigarettes, but they're smoking more marijuana. Marijuana legalization is moving at a really rapid clip in a lot of states, and in some surprising states. It's kind of an interesting mix where one thing is disappearing off the radar and the other is becoming a cause celeb, if you will. I mean, it's a big issue, it's a mainstream issue, and a lot of people are talking about it. I just think it's interesting because they're not identical, they're not the same thing exactly, but they do have a lot of parallels.
Well, and I think it also has to do with the health risks that, are soon to be related to each of those behaviors. And so, certainly, our awareness of the problems with cigarette smoking and the diseases associated with that over time have certainly, been understood and publicized, because I think they've been understood for a long time, but people publicly haven't been made aware of just how significant that is. And certainly cancer has touched us all in one form or another, whether from
Yeah.
cigarettes or something
And
else.
I think the things like cigarette smoking and the dangers of that, people driving with seat belts, also kind of like a general health concern. Not so much for masks during COVID, however, and that became a whole different can
Oh,
of
Lee,
worms.
oh, Lee, don't go
I
there.
did. I'm done. I'm done. But
Don't go
I'm
there.
okay. So that last point I made should go up in smoke. How's that? Which brings me to the fun fact. Okay, so we've been talking about cigarettes and other smoking consumption, how that's changed. So we went back to the Gallup poll of 1939, which I was hoping was going to be fourscore and 7 years ago. However, it's fourscore and 3 years ago. Apropos of nothing, but I just thought it would be nice to be able to say fourscore and 7 years ago, give me a sort of distinctive quality, I guess. But nonetheless, in
So, what
those
did this poll show from 1939, Lee?
yeah, well, it's 83 years, and it showed that among those who smoked, which was 64% of the population, cigarettes overwhelmingly number one. Two-thirds of the smokers were cigarette smokers back then. And then there was about 1 in 4, rather, who were pipe smokers, and a lesser number of cigar smoking. So, this was a country of cigarette smokers back then in the late 1930s. And when we look at today's numbers, that's such a very, very different picture. And as I said before, to see smokers, you don't see them at public events, you don't see them on public transportation. The whole thing is really turned over.
But this is with cigars and pipes. What's so interesting about this is what you don't see at all is, I mean, there are cigar bars,
Yeah.
but you basically don't see cigar smoking and you don't see pipe smoking. I mean, I
Uh,
No.
haven't seen somebody smoking a pipe in forever. Did you guys
Yeah.
have relatives that?
I went from cigarettes to pipes to nothing. So
Ah, so you were a pipe smoker.
but
What was your favorite
And
tobacco? They were flavored, weren't
isn't
they?
it also the image of the professor, the
well,
college
yes,
professor holding a pipe? I think Lee was going for the look more
the
than
look.
for the
Uh,
smoking.
Yeah, I think that's probably true for a period. But smoking a pipe was a lot of work. I mean, there was this constant fiddling, which is, you know,
But I gotta
Which
say,
is
was
actually
annoying.
your nature as well.
I
Yeah,
gotta say that
obsessive compulsive.
the
Yeah.
pipe smoke was the only kind of smoke that as a kid, and nobody in my family smoked pipes, but that was I actually kind of liked that. Whereas cigarette smoke, oh, and sugar. My dad did smoke cigars, and my sister got a battery-powered fan to hold it in his face to blow the smoke away. That's how much we
Well,
disliked
well,
cigars.
well, that's what we've learned also about secondhand smoke with
Yeah, she was way
cigarettes
ahead of her
She was
time.
ahead of her
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely ahead
for
of her
sure,
time.
for sure. But anyway, so that is where we are and where we leave it. And stay away from cigarettes for sure. Health, money, and any other reason. Socially, people will be really annoyed with you if you like.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review. Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them directly to @MaristPoll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it will cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as we release it.
We'll see you next time.